Hello, welcome to Lawrence County History Corner. My name is Lori, and today I am actually talking about part of American history that most of us are familiar with, but may not have realized exactly what Ironton's role and the citizens of Ironton's role they played in those events. It starts out with an article from February 11th, 1929, that was published in the Ironton News Reporter, which was one of the newspapers that Ironton had. And at the time, Ironton did have multiple newspapers. It started out with a photoplay, or what we would call a movie now, at the Marlowe Theater, and it was about the trial of 1898, which was the gold rush, one of the gold rushes that hit our country. And there were men from Ironton who left to participate in the gold rush. And this movie sparked an interest in these young men who would leave. At first, there was quite a few that were interested. There was all kinds of newspaper articles being published and ads all over the country about these great gold strikes. They made claims that the miners had taken so much free gold that it was piled by the sackfuls in the wars of Alaska. They talked about thousands of dollars being found in a single pan. Other claims were $100,000 was paid from a single claim in a matter of a few weeks. So it was easy money. It was like laying on the ground. And of course, who doesn't want easy money? Who doesn't want to be a millionaire or a rich person? And so this started people locally thinking about, maybe I want to go out west and make my fortune. So it started out with a company organized in Christmas of 1897, known as the Ironton Mining and Trading Company. It was organized by the late Colonel H.A. Marting. He was the president, and he started the plans that were made for a trip to the Yukon area. A lot of Irontonians and Lawrence Countians wanted to go on this trip, but by the time everything was settled, only 7 were going. Among those 7 were Henry Selb, Harry Corns, Adam Ketter, Henry Horschel, Peter Coper, John Q. Leedy, and George Crichton. Now, of these 7 men who left 30 years prior to the article and all came back, only Peter Coper was still living in Ironton. And in fact, he was working. He was a baker, and his shop was located on 5th and Hepler Streets. The Ironton Mining and Trading Company required all the 7 men to put in $600 into a pot, and Henry Selb was named as the treasurer. And this $600 was to pay all their expenses, including food. Now, they were also supposed to take their own money along for their personal needs. And for months leading up to their party leaving on the 28th of March, 1898, they kept the local shops busy providing clothing and boots and any other supplies they needed. And some of those supplies, eventually they would load on a boxcar that was placed on the switch of the Ironton Railroad Depot on 2nd and Railroad Street. They included sleds and packs, feed, 16 head of cattle, and 22 dogs with dog harnesses, besides their personal belongings. And they set off for the frozen north. And including some of the other products they took was also an oven and all kinds of cooking utensils and food, because they knew food in those locations during the gold rush was extremely expensive. You saw huge price gouging, and so they tried to take as much as they could with them so they wouldn't have to buy it later. Well, when they got to Seattle, they had their first setback. They discovered that the Ironton dogs that they had brought with them were not appropriate to be used as sled dogs. So they actually end up turning them all loose. Then they had a debate over what path they would take. Now, there was a couple different places places and ways to get to the Yukon area and the gold mines. One was the Chilkoot Pass, where hundreds were engulfed and died or were killed that year by the great snowslides. The group from Ironton decided to go the Sticker River toward the Hudson Bay summit. The Sticker River itself was named for George Comac, also known as Sticker George, because he lived with the Sticker Indians, Native Americans, who named the river and lived near there. Research revealed that the Sticker George found the first gold in 1896. The information about the gold strike didn't hit the United States until a steamer named the Excelsior docked at San Francisco during the summer of 1897. And that's when the following year there was a huge rush towards the area. And in fact, 1898 was the rush at its height at this time period. The Ironton Party spent most of its summer of 1898 reaching the top of the Hudson Bay summit. They moved in relays with heavy packs going only a few miles per day with their cattle, helping others in approaching the fall and with the approach of the fall and extremely cold weather, they built a hut where they established a base of supplies. They ended up killing some of their cattle and sold their meat to the passing prospectors and used the hides for a roof of their cabin. Mr. Cooper recalls that when the weather got down to about 40 below zero, that the hides froze so stiff that they pulled the nails out of the timbers, and he laid on his cot and looked to the roof up into the northern stars. So you can imagine how cold it must have been. And then add the fact that now the roof isn't even holding. Many of the members, of course, didn't have access to a razor or use razors, so they started seeing the long beers, which were in vogue at the time. Each member of the party took a turn cooking for a week. And Mr. Cooper recalled having to walk 500 yards to the river where a hole was cut in the ice every morning so they could even get water. And each morning when he returned from the walk to the river, his beard would be frozen stiff from his breath. Something to note, a historical note, in Ironton during this winter, the temperatures went as far below as 27 below zero. So it was just a recordly cold winter. From that point, after they had settled into their area, it required about 2 weeks via foot and dog sled to get to their nearest civilization port. Cities and towns were few and far between. About Christmas time, the party decided to send mail home to their relatives and families to make the dangerous trip over the frozen rivers and dangerous passages. It was decided the party of 6 would make the trip, each helping the other if they needed, and when the straws were drawn, it fell to Mr. Cooper to remain at the cabin to watch the food supply. For 2 weeks, he alone with a dog as his only companion. He had a revolver and a shotgun, and he shot wild fowl, and he remained there by himself. The day before the party returned to their cabin, the forest caught fire. Supposedly, the fire had been set by local Native Americans who were trying to frighten the white men away. And for miles and miles, the tall pines burned, and the Ironton men were successful in fighting the fire away from the cabin, so they were able to keep and save their home. When the spring arrived, many travelers passed the Ironton colony, as it would be known. News reached this part of the frozen north, and the British government would not recognize any claims of foreign subjects. Without reaching Dawson City, nor have had any of their dreams of gold come true, the Ironton Mining and Trading Company broke camp and started for home and their loved ones. Sadly, the return home was not as easy as they had hoped. Their travel back into civilization included blizzards, snowslides, ice floes, and breaks, and treacherous rapids of the Alaska, and perilous attacks by wild animals. Although they were unsuccessful, it wasn't uncommon. Less than 1% of the men who took part in the Gold Stampede came out of the North with any money to speak of. Most of the thriving businesses and most of the successful people and wealthy people were the ones who provided clothing and pawn shops and similar businesses. So basically, the gold rush people you didn't get much gold if you were actually trying to mine the gold. You got more money if you mined the miners, as they used to say. And that is just a short segment about the 1898 gold rush and the men from Ironton who went on their trip. If you would like to read this article or other articles, you can come into our branch and find information at the Ironton branch. Our genealogy department is located on the second floor, and you'll find a wealth of information. And if you have any questions, feel free to call us at 740-532-1124 and ask for the Hamner Room. I hope you enjoyed our story, and I will see you next time.